want you to think about the last time you felt truly supported, not just encouraged, like cheered on, like you go girl, but really mentally and emotionally held in a process. Maybe it was a friend being there for you when you're going through a really challenging moment. Perhaps it was a skill set that you didn't have that somebody was able to help you through. Let's say you were preparing for a very difficult and challenging process and you had a friend show up and actually support you throughout that process. And I just want you to notice that in those moments, you aren't just pushing through. You aren't using your own willpower to move through that moment. You actually are relying on a system that supports you. And so I just want to share a little story from my own personal experience. When I first started as the head of a small private school in Manhattan in New York City, I really didn't have the professional support I needed. Unfortunately, the small school that I was leading, it wasn't yet part of our regional organization. And so even though I knew that other school leaders in New York City would gather, I think it was once a month, maybe to have dinner and connect and support each other, I didn't have access to that. And so I remember the sense of, I'm doing all of this heavy lifting on my own. And by heavy lifting, I mean, many of you may not be aware of this, but when you have a private school and you're the head, there is the back end. There is almost this business or corporate aspect where you are responsible for overseeing the budget, fundraising, enrollment, and you're carrying the weight of that, as well as ensuring that everything happening within the school that you would think of as more your traditional principal role was also going well. So you're also holding the concerns of the humans in that space, right? The students, the faculty, the parents, etc. And so I'm just naming that because I want you to see, like, it's sometimes it's different from what most can experience on the outside because of our perceptions of what leading in a school may entail. And so in addition to taking care of all of the humans, which is always the most important thing, you also have to think about the institution. You have to think about the structure that is designed to hold it. So I actually spent most of my first year in that role talking to architects, dealing with contractors, because we were doing this physical expansion to our school space. So just keeping that in mind as a way of sharing the load of what it meant to lead in that moment. And while I was carrying those elements of these business aspects, I mean, it wasn't what I thought of when I thought of school leadership, but it was important and it needed to be done. And so I found that I was building my own professional life on a foundation of sin. And by that, I mean that I really didn't have a strong enough support base to hold me. So today I want us to talk about how to map the systems that actually hold you so that you can stop carrying the weight of so much on yourself and start leading really from a place of support. Let me back off for a second. My name is Kalima Fergus Ayele, and I am a school leader and systems design architect. I'm also the CEO and founder of Round Trip Ticket Home. And many people ask, why did you name your company Round Trip Ticket Home? And what I want to do to explain that is go back to a myth that is quite popular in our culture, and that is of the Wizard of Oz. So when we think about our central character, Dorothy, she is really on a quest, a hero's journey, if you will. She's ended up in a strange land. And to be quite transparent, my version of this story comes from The Wiz. I grew up watching that so many times, and I go back to that version quite frequently. I saw it on Broadway when it was in New York, and my children were also raised with watching Diana Ross play the character of Dorothy. And so we see this young woman as she navigates this strange land, and along the way she managed to connect with some companions, one of whom is the Scarecrow, who is in search of his intellect, and then we find the Tin Man, who's looking for his heart and compassion, and also the Lion, who's seeking courage. And they're all thinking that this great and powerful Wiz in the land of Oz will grant them the things that they seek. And when they get there, they're surprised to find that it's all a hoax. That this person who they thought had so much power was actually just a regular human being, and at that, not really an honest one. And so I use this as a reminder to ourselves to say, because at the end of the story, we realized that they all had what they thought they were looking for within, and also that nobody's coming to save us. There's nobody who's gonna show up. I mean, we all grew up with these fairy tales of a hero arriving just in time, and nobody's going to do that for us. We're the ones who have to do it for ourselves. And so today, our goal is to define our own systems. We're going to look at the structures, the calendar, the protocols, the boundary, the rituals that determine if you're grinding through life or if you're gliding through life. And so by the end of this video, I would like to share with you a framework to help you map out your personal systems and identify exactly where your systems might be failing you. Okay, so let's start with what your systems are. So your systems, I would think of as the structures that really architect your life. So if you can think of the blueprint of a house, right? There are walls, there's a foundation, you know where the rooms are. And I would say that correlates to what you do on a day-to-day basis in your life, right? What's your rhythm like? What time do you get up? When do you have most energy? When do you eat? When do you sleep? What are you doing with all the hours in between? We all have the same 24 hours, right? And I don't think all of the domains of our life are equal. I actually do think there's a hierarchy of sorts. And so the three domains that I would walk us through, domain number one is the most important. And that is your personal health and well-being. That is your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health, your spiritual health. That actually needs to take priority. And those health, I just put them all together as your personal health. They actually work together. So you might find wherever you start, it actually helps to influence the other areas, right? So many of us already know the benefits of eating well, of movement, of prayer, of meditation, of seeking therapy, or doing any tools that you find. You think about all these ancient practices, which actually combine these different elements that allow us to unify movement with breath, with focus. And so some of those practices, I'll just say a couple of them, such as yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong, actually weave those different elements together in a way that's holistic and comprehensive. So the question is, do you already have a system in place for addressing those aspects of your well-being? And it's actually not about the quantity of time. It could take 15 minutes, right? There are videos on YouTube that I use that are 10 minutes, and it's enough time for you to be able to spend some focused amount of energy on that area of your life. The second domain is your relationships. And I am using that in very broad terms because I do think domain number one is actually your relationship with yourself. But then I will say in domain number two, I'm talking about your relationships with other people, or it doesn't even have to be a human. It could be other elements that are living. It could be with nature. It could be with your pets. It could be in any capacity. But if we focus on those personal relationships, I'm just going to call that community and connection. How do you engage with others? So one of the things that I became very aware of, because at this current moment, as we face so many polycrises, right? There's so much going on. Sometimes our capacity for even engaging with other people is minimized because we're almost consistently in fight or flight mode and limbic hijack, if you will. And so what that means is, because we're constantly trying to protect ourselves, and it's almost like the porcupine with the spikes constantly constantly out, it makes us hard to connect with one another. So this might be an area where you might just have to say, do I have the systems in place? Am I texting? Am I calling? Do we have someone who's saying, hey, let's get together for a meal, or let's meet up? I know someone was even talking about this. I love this idea of even getting together and running errands together. I mean, I think that's a wonderful concept if you think about just the ways in which we can stay connected and stay in community. And then the third domain is actually what I would consider your public life. So this includes your career, your work, your creative offering, anything that you're doing to show up for the world or for the environment. And so literally we're talking about what you put out into the world as the third domain. And so I would see it as concentric circles. You start from the inside and work your way out. And so the question is, do you know if there's any challenges in any of those areas? And if they are, you would start with the inside first and then go out from there. Okay, so of course, there's other ways of approaching this. This process is not linear, but I encourage you to start from the inside and work your way out. So mapping those systems is the first step toward your life design process. It's really about creating a life blueprint that's sturdy enough so that you can show up anywhere as a whole and joyful human being. And so this week, I want you to pick just one of those three domains, either your personal health and well-being, your relationships, or your public offering, and I want you to actually audit it. I want you to find some area where you might actually just be powering through and not actually giving it the attention that it needs. Just be willing to face it and ask yourself, what could shift here and create more ease and joy? So for example, with me, I'll share, at one point I recognized I ended up training and doing a sprint triathlon for the first time in Cairo, Egypt. It was an amazing experience. In fact, at some point, I'd like to share in more detail in a future video about that experience and how it came about and how it really transformed me and the way I show up in the world. But I remember after that experience, how much I recognized that swimming was such a wonderful movement meditation for me. And as difficult as I realized it was, when I started my new job as a school leader in New York City as the head of a school, I decided I was going to commit to swimming regularly, which meant that I had to make the necessary sacrifice. I had to find a gym in New York City that had a swimming pool. It was not easy, okay, but it was worth it because I knew how important that element was for me at that time. When I think about relationships, again, moving into designing a new life system for myself, I recognized that I actually needed to cull some relationships. And it wasn't because there was anything that was going on that was harmful. It was just because my own capacity for connection was diminished because of the role that I was holding, right? I was caring for so many people as part of my professional life that I really did have to be a little bit less engaged socially and in a healthy way, right? I would say I was typically the more extroverted one. I would be the one who would say, hey, there's this new play. I'll get all the tickets, just give, Venmo me the money, and I would run around and do that. I just couldn't do that anymore. I ended up being more on the receiving end of those invitations. I was the one who somebody would reach out to and say, hey, I'm going to see this show. Would you like to join? And sometimes the answer was no. I just didn't always have it. And so I tried to prioritize when it was a birthday or when it was a special occasion. But honestly, I just didn't have the capacity to show up for social engagements as much as I had in the past. And then lastly, when I think about that third area of life, I would say one of the things that I had to figure out how to do was how to weave in more joy and connection even at work. And so I would try different different things. It was just an experiment. If it was a meeting with a colleague, I would ask them if they were okay with us taking a walking meeting to the nearby park and being able to sort of weave in movement and connection in those ways. And so I encourage you to try it out in your own. I'd love to hear what you've decided to choose in terms of your domain of focus. If you want to know more about my own personal journey, I'd love for you to join my Substack. There'll be links in the description. And also, I am here to help you as we build these systems together. I'm also preparing for another transition. This is what life is about at this moment. So it's wonderful for us to be able to gather around the virtual campfire, if you will, which is what I refer to as these laptop connections. So great to see you. See you next time. Bye.